You've probably heard that the home lab market is really, really bad right now, and you can't even get your hands on a basic Intel N100 or N150 mini server for less than $300 or $400 if you live in the United States right now. So today we're going to be talking about an alternative and why I think this particular laptop right here, which you can get on eBay for about $30, is probably one of the most exciting budget server options on the market right now. So let's talk about this Dell itself and why I feel like it is potentially a really good option. So the Dell E6440 is a 14-inch laptop that came out around 2013 or so, and it has a 4th generation Intel Core series processor. This one I think originally came with a Core i5. And of course, a 4th gen i5 is not very fast these days, but there's something very special about this particular era of the Dell Latitude and similar laptops like the much more popular ThinkPad T440p, and that's the fact that these 4th gen laptops were kind of the very last hurrah for laptops with socketed, upgradable CPUs. And so this laptop has been through a lot. Aside from putting in a 16GB kit of DDR3L RAM, I went ahead and upgraded this with a very uncommon CPU. It's the i7-4980HQ, and if you were ever into the ThinkPad T440p, you've probably heard of that CPU, because back then, a lot of people were getting those i7-4980HQs, which are harvested from old MacBooks, and they were buying them on these PGA adapter boards so that these BGA soldered CPUs could actually be put into these socketed laptops. And up until this point, I've never seen anybody else on the internet even attempt to put a 4980HQ in one of these Dell laptops, but I'm going to talk about my experience here because, as you can see, my laptop is turned on. It's actually working perfectly fine, and I've run all the performance numbers. I've tested out the thermals. This thing is faster than an Intel N100. It's a lot cheaper than most reputable N100 servers out there, and it's got a lot of I/O and expansion opportunity, given that it's a business laptop. So let's go over this particular E6440. On the side, you have a optical drive, which can be removed from the system very easily. So you could imagine maybe putting a 4K Blu-ray reader in there if you watched any of our ripping videos, or a second SATA hard drive, for example. I probably shouldn't have taken that out while it was turned on. And a lot of E6440s are also configured with an express card slot. So right there, I believe you have one lane of PCI Express 2.0, which can be used to add a GPU or something like that, or maybe even an NVMe SSD. So right there, you could have 2 drives, along with, of course, the fact that it has a SATA hard drive inside that I'm using as the boot media right now. So that's another drive. It's a little bit jank, but it's also very, very cheap. E6440s are not valued like ThinkPad T440Ps if you've ever looked into that market. You can buy these for like $30 right now with RAM and a CPU. I bought this one with a broken screen, and I bought a new keyboard and stuff because I wanted to use it as a laptop initially. But you can bypass all of that because these things actually have really good connectivity as well. We have a full-size HDMI port, VGA right there, not to mention a gigabit Ethernet. And with these Dell laptops, you also have a docking port on the bottom that you can use to get even more I/O through a port replicator. So if you need a lot of I/O, I think that the E6440 could actually be a really promising platform. But of course, the real star of the show here is that Intel Core i7-4980HQ. And I'm not going to say that you should do this upgrade. I went ahead and bought one of these CPUs on AliExpress from a seller that had a few different reviews on it, not a lot, but I don't know where these CPUs come from and how they're treated, because I don't think anybody is making these CPUs anymore. These have to be old stock. And unfortunately, my 4980HQ had a really big problem. One of the CPU pins was actually broken, and it fell right off as soon as I got the CPU. So I still tried to install it anyway. Obviously, it did not work. So I spent 3 hours painstakingly trying to solder that pin back on with a regular soldering iron. It actually did work, as you can clearly see. I don't know how long this is going to last, but I would definitely take time to consider whether or not the slight performance increase over other standard i7s would be worth it for you. This CPU in particular is the fastest CPU that you can put into one of these laptops, so if that's kind of the ballpark of performance you're looking for, you can get a BGA adapted i7 4980HQ for like $80, and putting that into a $30 laptop, you're only set back $110. Maybe you have to spend a couple extra bucks on RAM and drives, but in general, the performance that you're getting is really, really impressive. Not to mention that you don't have to buy a CPU right away. If you get one of these laptops, it's probably coming with a Core i5 or a Core i7 already, which is going to perform pretty decently. And if you're just doing a basic like file server, maybe a direct streaming Jellyfin server or something like that, it's probably going to be perfectly fine. These 4th gen Intel laptops really do have a lot of life left in them, and that's why I think they're such an interesting platform for building your own server. And to go ahead and test this out as a real NAS, I installed a couple of drives, and I installed ZimaOS, which, as you know, I'm a huge fan of ZimaOS. I can't stop talking about it, and I've reviewed a lot of Zima products running ZimaOS, but this is just going to be talking about the free ZimaOS. This is not sponsored in any way. I genuinely just really appreciate how it works as a platform, and with ZimaOS installed, we can go ahead and check out the IP address of the server, which is shown on the terminal of the laptop right now. It's just the 76 IP address for me. And you can see right here, we are in ZimaOS. I've gone over ZimaOS many times in the past, and it's always the same every time you set it up. Very simple. Give it a username and password. And I'm just going to go skip all this stuff and head straight to the dashboard so we can start looking at our ZimaOS installation. And when you install ZimaOS onto your server from an installation media, as I did, it's not going to come with any extra apps or anything that you don't need, but once you've made your account, you're pretty much ready to go. You can see right here that we're consuming 3 watts on our CPU, running at 43 degrees Celsius, and we're using 6% of our RAM right there. And you can just go into the App Store and start downloading stuff. So if you want to go through, maybe install copyparty, which is something that I've been looking into a lot more lately. If you want a very easy to set up file server, just go ahead and install that. I'll continue in the background, and we can start looking for some other apps. There should definitely be a listing in here somewhere for Jellyfin, although I'm not finding it right now. I'll scroll through for a second. There it is right there. Our Jellyfin installation, go ahead and install Jellyfin. That is also very, very easy to get up and running, and that's what I really like about ZimaOS, is that it gets out of your way and makes it very easy to start setting up your server with some practical software that you're actually going to use. Okay, let's go ahead and do a Minecraft server. I'm not sure which of these applications is more popular, actually, so I'm just gonna look at both of them. This is a open source Minecraft control panel. So let's go ahead and install that. I'll try to spin up a quick Minecraft server and just try to give a few more ideas as to how you might be able to use a server like this from reclaimed business laptops. As you can see right here, the applications that we're installing are just going to show up here on the home screen. So these are regular Docker containers. You click on it, and it's going to bring you to the Jellyfin page in this scenario. And if you want to modify the settings of that container, click right here, go into settings, and then you have all of the same settings that you'd get on any other NAS for configuring a Docker container. So for example, maybe I would want to, I don't think I need to do a mapping right now. I have ZimaOS just on a larger drive where I might also be storing my files. So all of our mappings and everything are perfectly fine. This should just work out of the box with no extra configuration. But you have that ability if you would like to. Copyparty, same thing. It's actually showing you the default login, which is really nice, and telling you how to change it. So I really appreciate that they added that note in there for me, because I didn't know about that until right now. So I'll open Copyparty, and it was Casa OS. Just like that, we have an empty instance of Copyparty that we can use right here. Obviously, you would be rooting this into your files and actually using it as a file server, but even just right now, I can create a directory. Let's just call it files. And just like this, you can start uploading stuff into your Copyparty. So if I go on my computer, I'm sure I can find something. So as a perfect example, I have a bunch of videos right here that I've made for YouTube. They're sitting in a folder right here, and I can just take this file and upload it directly onto the server, just like that. You can see right here the progress. We're sending this file to our server at about 113 megabytes per second. And you can see right there our file is available, and I can go ahead and I think just download it by right-clicking right there, and then I can start downloading that back to my computer. So it's a very easy way to spin up a file server. You don't even have to mess around with configuring Samba or anything like that. Just one of another many different applications you can deploy very easily within ZimaOS. It looks like our Minecraft server application right here is also set up. So you can see it's giving us a note telling us the default username and where the password is. So let's go ahead and check this out. And to find our password, we can just go into the actual app data folder for the installed application. It's right here. You can see our default password. It's going to be different for everybody, so I'm just going to copy this, and I can log in. And now that we're here, I'll try to actually create a server, and I'm excited to see how this works because I've never done this before. So we'll create a Minecraft server on vanilla. I like older versions, so let's do like 1.12.2 or something like that. Logan's Minecraft, and gives you all the options to set the RAM allocation and everything. I'm going to use 6 gigabytes. That should be plenty for all the people I'm going to have on my server, which is 1. So we'll go ahead. It's going to start importing all the files it needs to spin up your Minecraft server. I'll try to start this. Yes, I do agree to the terms. You can already see right here in the background, it's spun up. We're using about 1 gigabyte of memory. Our whole server log is available, and you can see it's actually done creating the spawn area. So I'm going to go ahead and try to load into this world really quick. And you can see our server is available right there, and with any luck, I should be able to join it. And we'll hopefully see a connection in the terminal. There we go. I joined the game. And it looks like everything is working perfectly fine. World is generating. Feels perfectly fine. I don't believe that there's any perceivable amount of lag or anything. So just like that, within a few minutes, you can realistically spin up your own game server on a very inexpensive laptop turned home lab. So overall, I'm really happy with how this entire setup is running. Don't forget, we also have a file server, we have Jellyfin, and we have a whole game server manager. We're only running 3.8 watts right there on our CPU. So I think this could be a very realistic option if you want to get into a home lab without spending home lab money right now, because that can end up being really expensive. Now, one really big downside of an older platform like this is going to be the graphics. So obviously in this particular laptop, I am stuck with the Intel integrated graphics of my CPU, which in this case is an Intel Iris Pro 5200. The 4980HQ does have better graphics than all of the other CPUs that you could have gotten with this laptop. I think the most standard is like HD Graphics 4600. But to make a long story short, you're going to be missing a lot of modern hardware encoding and decoding capabilities. So an Intel N100, you get AV1 basically for free, and it works really, really well. These are not able to encode or decode AV1 in hardware. You're missing that hardware acceleration, so you need to keep your expectations in check, and if you have the right use case, something like this could be a really good option. So I think that basically wraps it up for my Dell E6440 here. If you're interested in using a laptop like this or one of the many other socketed 4th gen Intel laptops that you can get very cheaply on the market right now, please let me know. I'd like to see people actually using these in their home lab as their home server, because I think there's still a lot of life left in these laptops that otherwise aren't very useful as actual portable machines anymore. So please let me know what you thought down in the comment section below. I hope you found it helpful. And as always, have an awesome day.